Thank you for joining us again for another All Israel News update. I'm Hanan Lishinsky, and today, maybe for the first time, we can talk about good news. We can bring you all the details and the background to Operation Arnon, the heroic operation by the IDF in the Gaza Strip yesterday, which freed 4 Israeli hostages. In a daring, rare daytime operation, the IDF managed to free Almog Meir Jan, Noa Argamani, Andrey Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv, 4 Israeli hostages that were brutally kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th while they were dancing and having a good time at the now, unfortunately, infamous Nova party, this rave party near the kibbutz of Reim. They were kidnapped from there. They were taken into the Gaza Strip, into an area that is opposite the border, which is called Nuseirat. Nuseirat is called a refugee camp, and it's a very dense urban area and near Reim, so this is where they were taken, not underground as many other hostages have been, and we heard from them after they came back that they were held in tunnels. Those 4, fortunately, were held in apartment buildings overground. Now, many experts have said that this is one of the most complex and difficult rescue operations that the IDF has ever carried out in its almost 70, 80-year history. As I said, a dense urban environment, something that once was a refugee camp and now just is a very densely populated neighborhood in the heart of the Gaza Strip. IDF units prepared for weeks, or possibly more than a month, for this one rescue mission. We've heard reports that there was so much intel gathered over weeks that the Israeli army could build mock-up buildings of where the hostages were held and train, prepare for the operation beforehand using those mock-up buildings. The IDF also said that over the past weeks it carried out many special raids to prepare for this rescue operation. All of the different IDF intelligence units, the domestic intelligence service Shin Bet, also called Shabak, they all contributed their intelligence. And even the US apparently contributed intelligence gathered from drones and by cyber means, and helped the Israeli forces to prepare in the best possible way for this operation. In addition, the IDF said that now it could openly say that the large-scale operation started by troops of the 98th Division of the IDF in the nearby areas of Al-Burij and Dir al-Balach, they actually were decoy or preparatory operations. Their main objective was to prepare the ground for the rescue operation in the nearby Nuseirat camp. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Nuseirat is a refugee camp, so-called, founded by the UN Institution for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, the now infamous UNRWA. And this started out as a refugee camp in 1948. Since then, as all refugee camps, by the way, it's important to notice, all the refugee camps in the Gaza Strip, in what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, even the ones in Lebanon, in Syria, all over this region, there are so-called Palestinian refugee camps. And people sometimes think that they are, tent towns, whatever you might think a refugee camp means. But no, they are very densely populated urban areas. They're just regular neighborhoods of larger towns, often suburbs to larger towns. And as I said, they are very densely populated, usually making operations there very difficult. The 98th Division operated nearby to raise intelligence, to act as a decoy, and to pull Hamas troops away from the true objective of their raid, which they themselves even didn't know until yesterday. Now, the 4 Israeli hostages were held in 2 separate buildings. One held the 3 men, and one held Noa Argamani, one of the most famous of the Israeli hostages. And those 2 buildings were located in the heart of Nuseirat, near a very populated and much visited shuk, or souk in Arabic, a marketplace. And actually, throughout the last months, there are accounts, Israeli accounts on TikTok, on Twitter, on other social media that are taking videos uploaded from this place and have been showing, even the IDF, I think, uploaded some of those videos, have been showing that those places were never evacuated, and they continued to act as active markets. There was food there. Now, this isn't to say that some of the areas in the Gaza Strip had food shortages. I think that is true. But for example, Nusayrat was an area where there apparently were no large food shortages, no famines, nothing of that sort. So again, very densely populated area where the IDF now had to go in there and, as one of the IDF representatives said, act with a pincer to grab the hostages, get them out as quickly as possible with the largest possible care so as not to kill hundreds of civilians during the operation. Now, interestingly, something that has come to light today, also on Twitter, or X as it's now called, the representative or the head of a so-called human rights organization, some kind of medical monitor that is active in Gaza, he wrote on his Twitter account that the IDF entered the apartment during the operation. They entered the apartment of a doctor and his son, who is an Al Jazeera journalist, and on the side also active as a Hamas spokesman for one of the Hamas ministries in Gaza. And this apartment was used to hold some of the hostages, apparently. It's not clear which one of them, and the reports are unconfirmed, of course. But this comes from the other side. This comes from Gaza. And they are complaining that some civilians were killed in this apartment, including the wife of one of the men there. On the other hand, this shows that the hostages, as the IDF said earlier, were held in civilian areas, not just in areas, held in apartment buildings, surrounded by civilian apartments, and they were held in specific rooms in those civilian apartments by, as we now find out from Palestinian reports, doctors and Al Jazeera journalists. So incredible if this is true, and Palestinians are trying to use this for their side. But of course, it strengthens the Israeli argument as well, and also confirms what the IDF has said, that the hostages were held in civilian areas by civilians affiliated with Hamas. So then the operation commenced. We have a very detailed article on All Israel News where you can read through all the details that have been published so far. Suffice it to say, it's an incredible operation. 2 teams went in there, got the hostages out, killed all the captors, apparently, and all the armed terrorists who were also there guarding the hostages. There was a big drama during the extraction. Apparently, the infiltration went smoothly. The extraction got somewhat complicated when one of the vehicles used to extract the hostages and the troops got stuck, and then they sent a second vehicle to extract them. The second vehicle also got stuck. Just incredible. Thank God they all reached the coast safely. Apparently, the coast was used by the IDF to extract the troops and the hostages. They were loaded onto helicopters. Also, the helicopters came under fire, but thank God the helicopters with all the troops and all the hostages got out alive. Unfortunately, one of the team leaders of the commando unit of the Yamam commando, a police commando, maybe one of the best that we have in Israel, one of the best units, the leader, who in Israel is always the first to go in, Arnon Zamora, a true hero. He was gravely wounded during the operation, and he was flown out by helicopter to an Israeli hospital where he died shortly after of his wounds. And in his honor, this operation was renamed Operation Arnon for his first name, and his name will live as long as the Israeli state exists, as long as the Jewish people are alive. His name will be remembered for his heroism, and he's the only Israeli victim during this whole operation. It's important also to mention that this whole operation was, again, a huge operation. We had all the intelligence efforts that we already mentioned. We had the commando units who actually went in that did amazing work. Then also the Air Force supported the whole operation with airstrikes before, during, and after the operation. Even the Navy was involved, apparently, in securing a perimeter on the coast as well as supporting fire from the sea. And hundreds of IDF soldiers, regular soldiers, civilian or citizen rather soldiers, regular Israelis who were called up for reserve duty, and also displayed incredible heroism, helping the commandos when they were stuck and this huge firefight developed. They rescued the elite soldiers actually and got them out safely. So regular soldiers from the armored brigade, from infantry units, apparently the paratroopers were involved, Kfir was involved, another infantry brigade. Just incredible work all around, incredible cooperation. And even Defense Minister Gallant said that this was the most incredible operation he has witnessed in his 47 years of service. Just incredible, and great news again, except for Arnon Zamoa, who gave his life to free the hostages. Some soldiers were lightly wounded by shrapnel, but nothing serious. So thank God for that. Now, to be fair, and to give a fair report of the whole events, it is important to notice that apparently there were significant casualties on the Palestinian side. Of course, Hamas supporters at Al Jazeera have claimed incredible numbers, 210 killed, 400 wounded. There is no way to verify those numbers, of course, and they are probably Hamas numbers, so we can be pretty sure they're inflated. The IDF spoke of under 100 casualties. I'm not sure if it's killed or wounded. But the IDF did say that many of those killed were terrorists and has begun identifying them by name and by position, and thus confirming that many terrorists were killed during the whole operation. Of course, again, we mentioned earlier that there was a big firefight that developed during the extraction. So probably many of the civilians who were killed, we can't be sure how many. And of course, everyone is one too many. The IDF tries not to kill civilians, but this is the cost of war. This is the cost of this kind of operation. And many of them were probably killed during the firefight that developed when Hamas terrorists tried to prevent IDF soldiers from rescuing our hostages. And again, we can't be sure how many were wounded or killed. This might become more clear over the coming days. So don't believe, of course, don't believe everything. Don't believe the first numbers that are given out. Sometimes in the first minutes after something happens, many of the Palestinian sources claim to already have the exact numbers. You should take those with several grains of salt. Another interesting aspect of the whole operation is that Palestinians have claimed that even the UN special reporter Albanese, who is known to be very hostile to Israel, she also referenced this rumor that American troops were directly involved in the whole operation, and that the floating pier built by the US on the Gaza coast was also used for during the operation. Now, the American Central Command, CENTCOM, denied those reports. And there were some videos circulating on social media that appeared to show the pier and an Israeli helicopter right next to it. So Palestinians tried to claim that they had something to do with that, but from what I can gather, it seems that the Israeli helicopters landed near the pier in the coast area and just took off from there, and no American personnel was directly involved in the whole operation. So, of course, here in Israel, we were overjoyed by those news. There was hardly a dry eye in the country, I think. Yesterday, we saw just incredible scenes, incredible videos being shared on social media of the happy news being shared over loudspeaker on the beaches, and cheers erupting across the beach. We've had very moving, in my opinion, pictures of from apartment buildings here in Israel where religious Jews and non-religious Jews live together. Then, of course, the religious Jews were keeping the Sabbath, so they didn't use their phones and they didn't know of the rescue operation. So what many of their neighbors did in apartment buildings across the country is just write them a note sticking it near the entrance, dear neighbors, hostages were rescued, and just an incredible display of solidarity and brotherhood all across the country yesterday. I advise you also to watch our editor-in-chief Joel Rosenberg's video to give you some impressions of the feelings Israelis had yesterday. Also Chaim Mailspin, who also uploads videos to our YouTube account from Gaza or from the front lines. Now, we also on All Israel News have an article about international reactions. Of course, the official reactions in many Western countries were positive and praised the operation. But we also had UN officials, as I mentioned earlier, the EU's, the European Union's foreign minister, on the one hand, kind of saying that he's happy that the hostages are back, but on the other hand, condemning Israel for what he called the massacre of Palestinian civilians. And also Arab countries expressed themselves in a similar way. Turkey, of course, Egypt, and several other countries criticized Israel for getting their hostages out, for killing civilians, of course, while getting the hostages out without referencing who the true who was to blame for those civilian deaths, which is Hamas, who took Israeli hostages in the first place and then hid them among women and children in civilian areas, of course. Now, in other reactions, naturally, Hamas wasn't very happy about this. Its political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who is in Qatar, said that Hamas wouldn't let Israel impose its will on it, implying also that the negotiations about another hostage deal might be endangered. Hamas's military spokesman Abu Ubaidah also said similar things and even threatened the other Israeli hostages, saying that their situation was worsened by this hostage rescue. So no surprise there, but the implications, it will be interesting to see the implications and the influence on the ongoing hostage deal negotiations, which were re-energized by President Biden's big speech last week when he presented his three-stage plan, which is still in play, but the hostage rescue operation will influence this whole situation. And U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken will also come to Israel in the coming days, next week, to continue to try to advance those talks to reach a hostage deal and a negotiated end to the war. And one last factor, one last development to be looking out for is the influence of this incredible operation on Israeli politics. Now, many won't know, it wasn't widely reported in international media or in English media, but Benny Gantz, the leader of the National Union and member in the War Cabinet, was about to leave the government yesterday evening. He had scheduled a press briefing, a statement to the press, and was widely expected to announce his resigning from the government, which would be, of course, throw Israeli politics into a whole big mess, would end the unity government that was seen as a signal to Hamas and to Israel's enemies that Israel stands united against its enemies during the war. So just shortly after the operation was announced, yesterday after the rescue was announced, Gantz, of course, said that he would cancel his statement. And sources close to Gantz, people around him, told Israeli media that he knew of the operation beforehand, of course, because he's a member of the War Cabinet, but he didn't want to cancel his statement beforehand so as not to tip off Hamas. So what happened after the operation is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, of course, took the opportunity and immediately gave a statement saying that Gantz should stay in the government, that now was this was a moment for unity and for solidarity and not for playing politics, which, of course, Netanyahu did by issuing the statement. But anyway, Gantz answered with some kind of unclear statement, saying, yes, it's time for unity, but, you know. And now, at the time that I'm recording this, actually Gantz was scheduled to give another, or give his statement to the press today in the evening. So as you can see, it's still light out. It's around just afternoon. And we will see what happens. We will see what Gantz says, if this really is the end of the unity government and probably the start of another election campaign, possibly in the next months. So visit us on All Israel News. If you see this, by the time you see this, probably the statement will be out, and visit All Israel News to get the latest update on this and, of course, on all the other developments during the war. Thank you for joining us.